The first time she called me the janitor, I was wiping a hairline of grout from the exact seam where my name belongs. November 3rd, 2019. Chicago. Sterling Freight Lobby. The lights above me flickered that cold, hospital white that makes everything look cleaner than it really is. The mop water steamed against the marble like breath on a mirror. I know every vein in this floor. I poured it 30 years ago when the company was still 3 trucks and a rented warehouse. Back then we were broke but stubborn. That's the only reason this building exists. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're listening from. I was crouched near the elevator when Harper walked in. She doesn't walk so much as she performs movement. Heels sharp, coat swinging just enough to make sure people look. Designer camel, fresh manicure. Not a hair out of place. Her perfume hit before her voice did. Peonies, expensive. She didn't lower her voice. He's just the janitor, she said into her phone. A short laugh followed, one of those airy, pretty laughs meant to dismiss, not to joke. The security guard's eyes twitched toward me. So did the receptionist's. They both looked away, like witnesses to something too small to intervene in but too sharp to forget. I kept my head down, kept cleaning, because silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. She walked past me without a glance, and that's what stung, not the words. The absence, like I wasn't even there. In a way, she was right. She didn't see the founder or the man who spent decades signing checks and sleeping 3 hours a night. She saw a man with a mop. She didn't know the marble she mocked was paid for in bruised knuckles and second mortgages. That night, she slid a realtor's brochure across my kitchen counter like she was handing me a restaurant menu. I recognized the photo before I even touched it. My house. Oak Park, white porch, crooked maple tree. That picture was taken in spring, the season the light hits just right. This neighborhood's too much house for a janitor, she said. No eye contact, just her finger tapping the asking price. $1.3 million. I didn't answer right away. I stared at her hand tapping the paper like she was knocking on the lid of my life. David, my son, swirled his wine glass. His wedding band caught the kitchen light, flashing gold like an answer he didn't want to give. He didn't defend me, he didn't say anything. And silence, when it comes from someone you love, cuts deeper than any insult. Yusuf got to admit, she added, smiling without warmth, the house is too much, its steps outdated. I folded the brochure in half slowly. That sound, a soft crack, filled the room louder than anything else. Harper went back to scrolling through her phone like the conversation was already settled. People think betrayal is some big explosion. It's not, it's quieter, it's a brochure left on the counter. A look exchanged at dinner, a sentence said too easily. Later that night, Lucia, our housekeeper, texted me a photo of that same folded brochure. Should I toss it? She wrote. I typed back. No, leave it. I wanted it there. Evidence isn't always a paper trail you find in court. Sometimes it's the thing someone forgets they left out. I went to bed late. The house was still, the kind of stillness that isn't peaceful. Just hollow. I walked the hallway barefoot, running my hand along the oak banister. I sanded this wood the night I made the final mortgage payment in '98. I can still feel the grit on my palms if I close my eyes. She said I was a janitor. She didn't say it to my face, but she may as well have carved it into the railing. The next morning I came back to the lobby before sunrise. Old habits die harder than pride. Snow hadn't fallen yet, but the sky had that weight, the kind that says it's on its way. I pushed the mop across the marble, slow and even. When I hit the center vein, a thin crack only I know is there. It vibrated under the mop like a heartbeat. This building remembers everything. So do I. Harper walked in at 8:17 a.m. She always walks like a camera sips watching. She spoke into her phone again, louder this time. I told you, we sit her listing in spring, David sips on board. Is sips just a matter of time. Just a matter of time. I gripped the mop handle harder. The plastic bent beneath my hand. She didn't even look my way. But here's the thing. She had no idea the floor she was walking on had my name on the deed. or that the founder's seat she thought was symbolic could still outvote her entire fantasy. She didn't know about the trust, the dividends, the ironclad filings sitting quietly in a safe deposit box. After work, I sat at the kitchen table alone. The house creaked the same way it did when David was a kid and ran down the hall at midnight. Harper's perfume still hung faintly in the air. The folded brochure was still on the counter. I picked it up and traced my thumb over the raised lettering on the realtor's logo. April 12th, 1992. That's the date I wrote on the back of a photograph of my first truck, the night the mortgage was approved. I still keep that photo in the fireproof box, right beside the trust papers and the deed. They've sat there for decades, waiting, guarding. Betrayal doesn't start with lawyers. It starts with whispers and assumptions, and she was whispering loud. David didn't come home that night. Harper did. She moved the living room couch 2 inches to the left. She called it better flow. She said it like she already owned the place. Her heels clicked against the wood floor, claiming territory. She turned to me, leaned on the armrest, and said, "You sit'll see. It's sit'll's going to be beautiful once we make it ours." Ours. That single word did more damage than her calling me a janitor ever could. Ours meant mine doesn't exist anymore. I didn't argue. I just watched. I've learned you don't fight an enemy who's still building their house of cards. You let them stack it, carefully. Then you blow once. When she went upstairs, I opened the drawer by the pantry and took out the safe deposit key. It's small, brass, cold even when the house is warm. That key is my quiet ace. I unlocked the fireproof box in the study, inside. The deed, dated June 4th, 2010. Trust papers, $4.2 million in assets, mostly company stock. Founder SIPS board seat certificate. A payroll ledger from 1991 with my name written in block letters, A. Dawson, founder. People like Harper think power lives in the noise. Real power lives in paperwork. Signatures, notarized ink. The things they don't even know to look for. I didn't hide the box afterward. I left it in the drawer, just slightly ajar. I wanted to see if she'd notice. If she'd flinch. Before bed, I turned off every light except the one over the foyer. The marble reflected it back, clean and cold. I stood there barefoot, feeling the stone chill the skin of my feet. It wasn't just a floor, it was the first thing I ever built that lasted. She mocked the floor. She walked over it like it was nothing. But one day it'll be the floor that swallows the sound of her leaving. And I'll still be here, mop in hand, not because I'm powerless, but because power doesn't sit need to scream. It waits. The first time I heard my daughter-in-law plot to erase me, it wasn't through a lawyer. It came through the kitchen speaker, between a weather report and a Sinatra playlist. November 7th. Chicago cold has a way of sneaking in under the door frames. I was at the sink rinsing my coffee mug when the Bluetooth picked up David's phone from the hallway. The speaker came alive with Harper's voice, sharp and honeyed at the same time. "He sips old baggage, David. We need to clear it. The house, the company, all of it. He sips not useful anymore." My hands froze on the porcelain. The mug tilted, clinking against the metal sink. Water ran over my wrist, but I barely felt it. David Diffts' voice came next. Low, tired. "Harper. Dawn dust Harper me," she snapped. "You want to build a future or babysit the past?" There was a silence so heavy it cracked something inside me. And then came the part I said I'll never forget. "If he will not move," she said, her tone softening like a blade wrapped in silk, "we still make sure he has to." I reached for the speaker, but I didn't turn it off. I needed to hear the full shape of her plan, every word. People show their real faces when they think you're not listening. David didn't defend me. He didn't say, "That's my father." He said nothing. Silence is a choice. I leaned my hands on the edge of the counter. The tile was cold, steady. My heartbeat wasn't. My house, which had been warm for 20 years, suddenly felt like a stranger's kitchen. I didn't call anyone. I didn't march upstairs to confront him. That's what people expect. A loud fight, tears, a slammed door. But I've learned something over time. When someone starts building their coup in whispers, shouting doesn't stop it. It only tells them they're winning. That night, I canceled my poker night. I didn't go to church the next morning. The house felt too loud and too quiet all at once. Every creak of the wood floor sounded like it was mocking me. Even the clock in the hallway seemed to tick louder, like it was counting down to something I couldn't yet see. I started moving slower, not out of age, out of weight. The kind that settles in your chest when the people you built your life around start chiseling away at its foundation. On November 10th, I walked into my study and opened the small safe behind the old bookshelf. Inside was the fireproof box. Same one I'd touched a week earlier. I slid it onto the desk and clicked it open like a ritual. Trust papers, deed, founder's certificate. Dividend instructions, a faded black and white photo of me in front of the first Sterling freight truck, my hand on the hood, grease under my nails. Legacy doesn't sleep, it just waits for the right hands. I spread everything out on the desk, careful not to overlap the pages. I wanted to see it all at once. $4.2 million in trust assets. Irrevocable. My name on the founder's seat. My house deed with the clean ink of June 4th, 2010. Harper could mock me all she wanted, but the law doesn't care how shiny her heels are. But here's the thing, knowing you have leverage and using it are two different beasts. The weight of betrayal isn't in the papers. It's in the pause before you decide whether to fight. I stared at the old truck photo. That truck's transmission had failed twice in the first year. I rebuilt it with Mark Franklin in a freezing warehouse in '89. We'd been kids with loans and faith. Now, decades later, a woman who never lifted a single pallet wanted to erase me like a typo. I didn't cry. Men like me don't cry for insults. We tighten. Around midnight, I walked down the hallway barefoot. The floorboards sighed. Harper and David's laughter drifted from the guest room upstairs, faint, like smoke. She wasn't worried. She thought she'd already won. I paused at the foot of the stairs and listened. Not to spy, to remember. To burn the sound into my memory. Because every good revenge needs a moment. A single quiet snap when everything turns. This was mine. The next morning, Lucia asked if I wanted her to start packing up the garage like Harper had suggested. I looked at her for a long second before answering. No, I said simply. Nothing leaves this house. She nodded. Lucia's worked here long enough to read between my words. That small nod was more loyal than anything I'd gotten from my own son in weeks. That day I went to the Sterling Freight lobby earlier than usual. 5:52 a.m. snow had started dusting the street overnight. Not the pretty kind, the kind that lingers and hardens just like people's intentions when they think no one's paying attention. I ran the mop slowly, letting the sound echo off the lobby walls. Empty building. Silent city. My reflection in the marble looked tired but not broken. That mattered. My phone buzzed in my back pocket. It was David. One text. Just 3 words. We need space. I stared at the screen. Not because the words surprised me, they didn't, but because of how ordinary betrayal always looks when it first arrives. Neat, casual. Like it hasn't yet started to rot. I didn't net a reply. Instead, I walked to the security desk and pulled out a manila envelope I'd tucked under the counter years ago. Inside was an extra badge, the one marked with a tiny red dot on the back. Founder's clearance. Most people thought it didn't work anymore. Most people were wrong. When I swiped it at the elevator, the doors opened instantly. Some doors don't forget the hands that built them. Upstairs, in the executive hallway, everything smelled sterile and new glass walls. Polished desks. Harper's voice echoed faintly from the boardroom, but I didn't step closer. Not yet. This wasn't the moment to be heard. This was the moment to watch. The weight in my chest had shifted from pain to steel. I drove home that night past the frozen river, the snow falling in thin sheets across the windshield. My phone buzzed again, another message from David. I didn't check it. Some conversations can wait until after the ground stops shaking. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the truck with the engine off and the heater running. The house looked the same maple tree, same front porch light, but it no longer felt like mine alone. It felt occupied. And I don't mean physically. Inside, Harper had lit candles in the living room. She was laughing on the phone. No, he sits still there. but not for long. I walked past her without a word. She didn't bother to lower her voice. People like Harper think silence means defeat. They don't realize silence is a door being quietly locked from the other side. In the study, I picked up the trust papers again, ran my thumb over my own signature. The weight in that ink felt heavier than her entire Instagram perfect life. That night, I wrote 3 things on a yellow legal pad. Keep every piece of paper. Move quietly. Let them talk. And under it, one line I'd zit repeat like a prayer for the next 3 months. They can steal what set's already mine. The night betrayal stops hurting is the night planning begins. For me, that night came on November 12th. I was sitting at the kitchen table at 2:14 in the morning. The house was still, the maple outside scratched against the window like an old metronome. Harper and David were upstairs, their muffled footsteps had gone silent hours ago. I stared at the yellow legal pad with those 3 lines written in my handwriting. Keep every piece of paper. Move quietly. Let them talk. Underneath, I've written one more line in smaller letters. Fireproof box. I got up, walked into the study, and opened the drawer with the brass key. The fireproof box was heavier than I remembered, like it had absorbed the weight of everything it protected. I carried it to the table, the metal clinking softly against the wood. When I flipped the latch, the scent of old paper hit me, ink and dust and time. Deed to the house. Dated June 4th, 2010. Trust agreement. $4.2 million in assets. Founder SIP's board seat certificate. A photo of the first Sterling freight truck. Dividend distribution instructions. Original articles of incorporation signed in blue ink. I laid each piece on the table with the same care I once gave building the company. Each document was a brick in a fortress. Harper didn't even know existed. This wasn't set, just nostalgia. This was leverage. Around 3:05 a.m., I dialed Martin Cole's number. Martin's been my lawyer for 22 years. Not the flashy kind, the kind who actually reads every footnote. He answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly. Alexis, everything okay? I need to update my trust protocols, I said. A pause. This about Harper? Yeah. Then I told make coffee. By 8:30 that morning, we were sitting in his office overlooking Wacker Drive. The windows were fogged at the edges, Chicago winter pressing against the glass. He wore the same brown tweed jacket he's worn since the late 90s. Martin flipped through the trust papers, the quiet rustle of legal pages cutting through the hum of the radiator. She doesn't know what she's walking into, he murmured. She thinks she can list my house like it accepts a handbag on sale. He looked up at me over his glasses. She SIP's not the first person to underestimate paperwork. I leaned back in the chair. I said not going to let her turn what I built into her decor. He tapped the trust document with the back of his pen. Your trust is airtight, irrevocable. If they try to claim any of this, it'll bounce off like rubber on stone. I exhaled slowly. Not relief exactly, more like controlled clarity. We set the legal wheels in motion quietly, confirming ownership structure, cross-referencing dividend schedules, locking down safe deposit access, and initiating a discreet audit trail. Everything would be documented. Dated, sealed. That afternoon, I met Mark Franklin at the warehouse. Mark's been with me since the beginning, the kind of man who used to sleep in the cab of a truck between shifts. Now he's CEO. But between us, nothing really changed. He leaned against the fender of a semi, hands in the pockets of his grease-stained jacket. The air inside the warehouse smelled like oil and winter. She called you a janitor? He asked, squinting like he couldn't quite believe it. She did. He let out a laugh that wasn't said as funny. That girl has no idea. She doesn't even know the founder SIP's seat still has teeth. Good, Mark said. Let her keep thinking it doesn't set. We stood there in silence for a minute, listening to the low rumble of diesel engines idling outside. That sound had always meant survival to us. He finally spoke. What says your play? Not noise, I said. I sup not gonna yell or beg. I sup going to let her build her sandcastle. And when the tide comes in, it'll be on paper. He finished for me. I nodded. That evening, back at the house, David avoided me. I was in the kitchen making black coffee when he came downstairs with his coat half on. Going out? I asked. He hesitated. Yeah. Harper sits, showing me something. He couldn't even look me in the eye when he said her name. Don't set sign anything, I said evenly. He frowned. I am not. David, I interrupted, my voice calm but hard enough to cut. Don sit sign anything. He didn't respond, just walked out the door. The click of the latch sounded like something closing in more ways than one. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. A forwarded message from David Siff's sister, Julia. Harper had accidentally sent a text meant for someone else. Once we get him out, the company sips ours. He sips not even active anymore, just a name on paper. Not even active anymore. Just a name on paper. She didn't realize that name on paper is what built the walls around her, and those walls are not hers to move. I stared at the message for a long time. Betrayal hurts less the second time. It just hardens. I printed the text out and slipped it into the folder with the rest of the documents. Not because I needed it legally yet, but because evidence has a way of aging well. The next morning, I made a quiet stop at the Cook County Recorder's office. The clerk barely looked up when I slid the form across the counter. Property record update. I said, trust owner verification. She stamped it without fanfare. Another brick set. On the way out, I watched the snow fall onto the courthouse steps. Chicago snow doesn't drift soft. It lands heavy. It sticks, just like paper trails. By mid-afternoon, I was back at Sterling Freight. Harper was there, of course, dressed like she was on the cover of some lifestyle blog. She leaned on the receptionist's desk, pretending to care about whatever charity gala she'd been yammering about all week. She didn't notice me step into the elevator. The Founder Sips badge still works. The elevator hummed as it climbed. Each floor I passed reminded me this isn't just a building, it's a spine I built with my own hands. She was climbing it like a ladder she didn't own. That night, I laid the folder flat on my dining table. Deed, trust, text message, dividend schedule, founder's certificate. Everything in one place. Everything sharp. I stared at it long enough to feel the marble floor under my feet start to steady me again. People like Harper don't understand power. They think it's loud, flashy, public. But real power lives in the quiet, in the legal clauses nobody reads, in the trust language that outlasts Instagram captions, in signatures made decades before they ever walked into the room. I didn't need to fight her. I needed to wait. Wait for her to step exactly where I wanted. Because she would. They always do. November 25th, 2019. The first real snow came that morning. Not the polite dusting from early in the month. This one fell like a verdict, heavy, slow, deliberate. The kind that sticks to the windowsills and silences the city. Chicago gets a certain kind of quiet in winter, the kind where even traffic seems to hold its breath. I stood in the marble lobby of Sterling Freight at 6:04 a.m., mop bucket tucked away, gloves in my coat pocket. The marble was slick from the door's draft, and I could feel the air pressure shift every time someone came in. Snow means new steps, new tracks, and I was about to leave some of my own. At 8:10 sharp, I walked into Martin Cole's office again. He already had the paperwork stacked like ammunition. Deed transfer documents, trust addendum, dividend freeze instructions, and a notice of resolution filing dated for December 24th. It wasn't war, it was chess, and I just moved my queen into position. Once this is filed, Martin said, flipping a page with the calm of a man whose sep's been here before, the house will belong to the trust. Noah becomes the successor trustee. Irrevocable, untouchable. I nodded slowly. I built it with my hands. She once said sell it with her mouth. He smirked, the closest thing Martin gives to a smile. You stir signing her out of the picture without ever having to raise your voice. I pressed the pen to the paper. The date, November 25th, was already printed on the line. My signature came out clean, steady. 30 seconds of ink, locking away 30 years of sweat. When the notary stamped the document, the sound echoed in the office like a gunshot muffled by snow. Back at the house that afternoon, Harper was pacing the living room. Realtor Karen perched on the couch like a crow on a fence. She had a glossy folder open to a page with bullet points titled Modernizing a Classic. My house, my walls. David, Harper said, twirling a pen like a conductor sips baton, the market helps us ideal right now. We should list before New Year sepsis. Imagine the equity we can unlock. She said equity like it was her word. Her discovery, like I hadn't spent 30 years building the thing she wanted to flip. I walked in through the back door quietly. Harper didn't see me at first. Karen did. She shifted in her seat, uncertain, like a vulture realizing the lion isn't dead after all. Harper turned, smiling that tight little smile she used when she thought she was 3 moves ahead. Alexis, she said lightly, we were just talking about the house. I heard. Perfect timing then. She laid the pen down on the table. We set her drafting an offer strategy. This place is going to make someone very happy. I stepped closer. Slow. It already does. Her smile faltered for half a second. David stood behind her, arms crossed but eyes down. He wasn't in this conversation, he'd already left it days ago. Karen cleared her throat. Mr. Dawson, I sept love to schedule an appraisal. No need, I interrupted, my tone flat. Harper raised an eyebrow. Why not? I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a folded document, and slid it across the table. The trust deed notarized that morning. Her manicured hand reached for it automatically, but she froze halfway through. Something in my expression must have given it away. She read the heading once. Then again, you, she whispered? You transferred the house? No, I said quietly. I protected it. Her jaw tightened, but she recovered fast. She was quick, I still to give her that. That doesn't set change anything. You still live here. You can set just... I can, I said. And I did. Karen glanced between us like she'd stepped into a storm she wasn't paid enough to weather. I think I'll reschedule the appraisal, she said, packing her glossy folder fast. Harper didn't stop her. She just stood there, hands on the edge of the granite island, her perfect mask starting to tremble. Later that night, Harper tried a different tactic. She waited until David was upstairs, then found me in the study. I was sitting at the desk, flipping through dividend statements. You think you're clever, she said softly. Not soft like gentle, soft like the low growl before a dog bares its teeth. I didn't miss look up. I think I sit and careful. She took a step closer, heels clicking on the hardwood. You can keep controlling everything forever. I finally raised my eyes to hers. Harper, I don't estit control everything, just what seps mine. She let out a sharp laugh, but it didn't sound like victory, more like nerves. Noah sips 15. You really think he can handle? He wouldn't have to, I interrupted. That sips the beauty of irrevocable trusts. You can touch what doesn't belong to you. For a moment her mask slipped completely. It wasn't fury yet, just shock. The realization that the ground she thought she owned was made of ice. You still regret this, she spat. I smiled. Maybe, but you still never owned this house. She left without slamming the door. Slamming means power. She didn't have any left in that room. On December 2nd, the dividend instructions were filed with the board secretary. Harper didn't know yet. She was still busy redecorating her fantasy. Holiday lights, candles, pretending the house was already in her name. She didn't see the foundation shift beneath her feet. December 24th, a board notice went out. Resolution 14B. A simple line at the top. Founder SIP seat to exercise reserved voting rights at Q1 board meeting. I didn't announce it to anyone. Not to Harper. Not even to David. Some battles don't need a trumpet. Just a quiet piece of paper sliding into the right folder at the right time. That night I walked through the lobby after everyone had gone home. Snow pressed against the glass doors like white noise. I set the mop in the corner and stood in the center of the marble floor. The polished stone mirrored the overhead lights, pale and still. My reflection looked older than I felt, but steadier than I'd been in weeks. I knelt and ran my fingers across the same hairline crack I'd touched that first day. 30 years of footsteps, thousands of people, dozens of storms, and it's still here, unbroken. She wanted my house, my name, my floor. She didn't realize all of it was already behind locked walls of ink and law. For the first time since Harper said those words, "He's just the janitor," I felt something settle in my chest that wasn't pain. It was precision. People like Harper think power comes from noise, but real power comes from filing things when no one's looking, from signatures no one sees coming, from snow that falls soft but changes everything. This was my first strike, and she didn't touch even hear it land. December 5th, 2019. The realtor's candles were already lit when I walked in. Eucalyptus and linen, the kind of scent people use to make strangers feel at home in a place they don't own yet. Harper was standing in the center of my living room, hands on her hips, directing people like a set designer. A white rug had been rolled out over the oak floors, and the old family photos were gone from the shelves. She didn't even look surprised when I opened the door. She looked prepared. "This," she said brightly, gesturing toward the room as if she built it herself, "is what buyers want. Clean lines, open space, a touch of warmth." She pronounced warmth like a real estate ad. There was a soft instrumental playlist humming from the Bluetooth speaker, the same device that had betrayed her whispers weeks ago. The realtor, Karen, was back, this time with a clipboard and a pair of thin gloves, like she didn't want to smudge anything in my house. "Alexis," Harper said, walking toward me with that smile, the kind she used when she wanted to look charming for Instagram. Good timing. We sat doing a pre-listing walkthrough. "No," I said evenly. She blinked as if the word didn't set register. "No what?" "This house isn't set for sale." Karen froze. Her pen hovered over the page. "I beg your pardon?" I stepped forward, boots still wet from the snow outside. I didn't bother taking them off. I said, "This house isn't set for sale." Harper laughed, but there was a sharp edge to it. "Alexis, you can sit just—" "I can," I said, and I did. I pulled the trust deed from my coat, unfolded it deliberately, and laid it flat on the granite kitchen counter. The notary seal caught the overhead light. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, like the house itself was listening. Karen took one glance at the document and stepped back. "I should give you two a moment." Harper's smile cracked at the edges. "This isn't over," she whispered, but even she didn't sound sure. That night, I walked the house alone. The eucalyptus scent still clung to the air. She'd removed the framed photo of David as a toddler from the mantel and replaced it with some generic art piece, beige and gray, the kind that fits into someone else's story. I picked the photo up from where she'd tucked it in a box under the stairs. The edges of the frame were chipped from years of sitting in the same spot. That photo wasn't expensive. It wasn't even in focus, but it was real. Harper didn't want real, she wanted staged. At 10:42 p.m., I heard her voice through the half-open kitchen door. She was on the phone. Her tone wasn't sharp this time. It was low, frantic. "No, it's not supposed to be like this. He wasn't supposed to move so fast." Silence on the other end. Then Harper again. "No, the house is in a trust now." A trust, that I don't know what that means exactly, but Martin Seff's name came up, and no, Seff's not supposed to have this much power. She didn't know I was standing in the dark hallway, just beyond the line of light spilling from the kitchen. I didn't move. I just listened. The edges of her confidence were starting to fray. Her voice cracked once, just once. That was the sound I'd been waiting for. She wasn't scared of losing me. She was scared of losing control. The next morning, December 6th, she tried to regain her footing. She hosted a small brunch, two of her friends from her influencer circle, a realtor friend of Karen's, and a cousin who once bragged about marrying money. The house smelled like overpriced pastries and fresh coffee. She wore a cream sweater, soft makeup, carefully staged vulnerability. I stood at the far end of the living room, leaning against the doorframe. They spoke like I wasn't there. That was their first mistake. "Once the house is listed, we'll have enough leverage to make David the controlling vote," one of them said, voice low but not low enough. Another giggled. "You still be running the place by spring." Harper smiled, but I caught the way her hand fidgeted with the napkin. Her mask was slipping in micro movements now. I cleared my throat slowly, every eye turned toward me. I think you all might be a little ahead of yourselves, I said quietly. The cousin blinked. Excuse me. The house isn't set yours, I continued. It's set's not for sale, and the company doesn't set belong to David. Harper Sip's head snapped toward me. Alexis Dawn set. I took a step closer, just enough for my voice to carry without volume. Here sips the thing about power. You can dress it up in brunch and hashtags, but at the end of the day, the deed doesn't sip care about your outfit. The cousin flushed. The realtor friend looked away. One by one, they excused themselves. Faster than they'd arrived, Harper stood in the center of the room, alone. That was strike two. On December 12th, David finally confronted me. He came into the study while I was going through old dividend statements. Snow battered the window outside. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said. I didn't look up. For who? For everyone. No, I said. For her. His jaw tightened. She just wants stability. She wants ownership. He stepped forward. She sips my wife. And this, I said, tapping the folder on the desk, is my life. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. The boy I raised was still there, buried under her shadow, but he wasn't strong enough to step out of it yet. Not then. I'm not signing anything, I said. And neither are you. He didn't answer. He left with his coat unbuttoned, snow swirling around him as he disappeared down the walk. At 1 a.m. that night, I walked barefoot through the foyer. The marble floor was cold against my skin, the same cold I felt in the Sterling Freight lobby. I paused halfway across the foyer and listened. In the silence of winter nights, this house speaks every groan of the wood, every whisper in the walls. It's mine. I built it. I bled for it. And now it was tightening around her like a gate she couldn't pry open. Upstairs, Harper's light was still on. She wasn't sleeping well anymore. Good. Neither was I in the beginning. Power doesn't come from screaming. It comes from making someone else hear the echoes of their own footsteps in a house they can't claim. This was the first crack in her crown. And the house, my house, heard it too. December 22nd, 2019. The house smelled like cinnamon, mulled wine, and fake cheer. Harper was in full host mode, Christmas cocktail party, guest list handwritten in gold ink. She'd invited more people than we had chairs for, realtor friends, socialites, a couple of people from the company who'd clearly been lured with the promise of a festive evening. She never missed a chance to perform ownership. But there's a difference between performing power and having it. I leaned against the archway between the foyer and the living room, hands in my pockets watching her hold court. She laughed too loudly at someone's joke, brushing snowflakes off the shoulders of a guest's coat like she owned the house. Candles flickered in every corner. Warm light bounced off the marble foyer, making the place look softer than it felt. She didn't see the house like I did. She didn't see how the snow outside pressed against the windows like cold hands, how the baseboard creaked when too many people stepped on it at once. I built this house to hold a family, not a brand. Alexis, Harper called from across the room, that polished smile on her lips. Come say hello to Roger. He works in commercial property. I walked over slowly. Roger was the kind of man who thinks a firm handshake makes him bulletproof. Pleasure, he said. I've heard a lot about this place. I bet you have, I said. He chuckled. Harper tells me you're such a ready to downsize. Oak Park Sips Market is hot. I met Harper's eyes. She didn't flinch, but something in her jaw tightened. I said, not selling, I said evenly. But I hope she didn't waste your time. Roger blinked, confused. Harper cut in quickly. He seps just being modest. You know how fathers are. I raised an eyebrow. No, I don't think he does. Roger excused himself a minute later, muttering something about needing another drink. Harper turned to me, her smile barely holding. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Undermining me. I let the silence stretch between us, just long enough for it to sting. You said are doing a fine job of that on your own. An hour later, the party was in full swing. Harper moved through the crowd like a hostess on camera. Every laugh was too loud. Every compliment she gave was too practiced. And under it all, I could hear the house groan under the weight of strangers. I didn't mingle. I didn't have to. Power isn't in mingling, it's in knowing that every word they're speaking in my house is resting on top of a trust document with my name on it. At 9:13 p.m., Lucia came over quietly, placing a hand on my arm. She never interrupts these things. She moved your mother's clock, Lucia whispered. I turned. The old walnut clock that had stood on the mantel since 1985 was gone from its spot. Harper had replaced it with a minimalist ceramic vase. White, empty, soulless. She said it thug-clashed Sesta, Lucia added. I stared at the blank space where the clock had been. It wasn't about furniture, it was about erasure. Later that night, after the guests left, Harper started collecting empty glasses with a practiced air. Her voice was tight. You could at least pretend to support me. I don't set support illusions. God, you are impossible, she snapped, slamming a wine glass a little too hard into the sink. I stepped closer. This house isn't set to stage, Harper. She turned around, arms crossed, jaw set. You think you can keep everything locked away in your little box. But people move on, Alexis. Companies evolve. Families change. You stir clinging to something that isn't set even yours anymore. I almost laughed. Not mine? Her silence said everything. I leaned against the counter, calm as winter. You, Sepp, built this party on air. Every candle in this house is sitting on paper you don't even know how to read. She swallowed, just once. Then she walked away. December 24th. I sat in my study as the board secretary emailed the official Resolution 14B confirmation. One line buried in the third paragraph, Founder Sepp's seat, active for Q1 board meeting January 6, 2020. Harper was in the kitchen humming to some Christmas song, blissfully unaware. She thought her party was her power. She didn't realize the real strike was already in motion. I opened the drawer and took out the trust binder. My signature from November 25th stared back at me like a quiet promise. December 25th, Christmas morning. Snow blanketed the neighborhood, the kind of thick, heavy snow that makes everything feel quieter than it is. Harper handed out gifts like a queen distributing tokens. She gave me a box with cufflinks inside. Expensive, meaningless. She smiled like she Sept already won. I smiled back like she had no idea she'd already lost. David sat on the couch, quiet. He'd grown thinner these past weeks. His hands fidgeted when she spoke. His silence was still a wound, but it was also a map of how deep she'd gotten her hooks into him. She leaned into him on the couch, whispering something I couldn't hear. He nodded, just slightly. But for the first time, he didn't look convinced. That night, when the house was quiet and Harper had gone upstairs, I sat in the living room with only the tree lights on. The clock was still missing. Its absence was louder than the tick had ever been. I ran my fingers over the mantel where the clock used to sit. Dust, a faint line. The outline of something solid removed by someone temporary. Lucia came by to lock up the kitchen. She paused at the doorway. She looks smaller when she doesn't know you're watching, she said softly. I looked at Lucia. What makes you say that? She performs. You build. Then she left, and I sat alone in the silence. December 27th. Harper hosted another small gathering, this time fewer guests, more tension. Word was starting to spread in quiet corners. Someone in her circle had already heard about the trust. I could see it in the way one of her friends avoided eye contact. Paperwork spreads faster than rumors when it's real. She laughed anyway. Poured drinks. Adjusted her cream sweater like armor. But the marble foyer doesn't lie. Her heels clicked sharper now, less certain. The house was no longer a set, it was a stage she didn't control. I leaned against the same archway as before, hands in pockets, listening to their conversations echo against the marble. Harper didn't approach me that night. She couldn't. The trust filing had turned her from a queen into an uninvited guest, who just didn't know it yet. December 31st. New Year's Eve. No party this time. Harper tried to convince David to book a trip. Something about starting fresh. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no either. That's how control unravels. Not in a scream, but in hesitation. Just before midnight, snow began to fall again. I opened the front door, stepped onto the porch barefoot, and let the cold bite my skin. The neighborhood was asleep. The maple tree stood coated in white, still as a confession. Behind me, the house was silent. No candles, no laughter, no Harper pretending she was queen. I whispered into the snow. Not loud enough for anyone to hear. You can take what set's already locked. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the house was under siege. I felt like it was waiting. Waiting for January 6th. Waiting for the boardroom. The silence didn't scare me anymore. It echoed. January 6th, 2020? The wind coming off the river that morning felt like it could peel skin. Chicago in January doesn't forgive anyone. It doesn't care if you're rich or clever or armed with a realtor brochure. It cuts everyone the same way. I arrived at Sterling Freight headquarters at 7:15 a.m. The sky was a dull slate gray. Snow lined the streets like a thin film of ash. The security guard at the front desk, Ralph, who'd been there since my first payroll in 1990, gave me a nod. "Big day," he said. "Yeah," I replied. "Big day." My founder's badge still worked. It always had. I ran my thumb over the faded lettering as I stepped into the elevator. The motor hummed low and steady, the way it always had. There was something poetic about that. How the old things outlast the loud ones. The boardroom was on the 12th floor. Glass walls, long walnut table. A projector already set up, humming softly in the corner. Martin was there first, flipping through a thin binder. Mark Franklin leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, wearing that old work jacket he never gave up, even when he started signing million-dollar contracts. "Morning," Mark said. I nodded. "Harper Sip's not here yet," Martin added. "But her lawyer is downstairs." I took my seat at the end of the table. Founder's seat. It wasn't a title you could buy. It was one you signed into existence with sweat and time. There's a difference. By 8:45 a.m. The room was full. Board members. Counsel. Harper. She walked in wearing a white coat, hair perfectly done that I've already one smile plastered across her face. She kissed David on the cheek before taking her seat beside him. He didn't quite meet my eyes. Her lawyer, Thomas Archer, strutted in behind her. Too slick, too rehearsed. I've met men like him all my life. The kind who think signatures are just suggestions. "Good morning, everyone," he announced, as if he owned the room. He didn't stay. The board chair, Susan Lee, called the meeting to order. "Resolution 14B is on the agenda," she said. Her voice was cool, efficient. "Founder SIP's reserved seat activation and dividend structure review." The projector clicked on. My name appeared at the top of the cap table. 38%. Alexis Dawson. 17%. Mark Franklin. The rest scattered between early employees, institutional investors, and the Dawson Family Trust. Harper's name wasn't on it, not once. She frowned. It was slight, almost invisible, but I saw it. Thomas leaned forward. "Before we get into any procedural motions, I want to clarify something. My client has reason to believe." Mark cut him off. "Your client doesn't hold a single share." The silence that followed was perfect. Susan gestured to Martin. "Mr. Cole, please read the resolution." Martin stood, glasses perched on his nose. His voice carried the weight of legal steel. "Resolution 14B, activation of Founder Sepser's reserved seat, established 1990. Exercising full voting rights on dividend structure and company governance. Effective immediately." Thomas shifted in his seat. Harper crossed her legs tightly, tapping one manicured finger against the folder in front of her. "This is absurd," she said, laughing too loud. "SEP's not even active." I looked at her. "Harper," I said quietly, "I swept floors because I built them, not because I forgot who I am." She blinked, thrown off by the calm in my voice. Martin continued, "Per the 1990 Articles of Incorporation and subsequent trust filings dated November 25, 2019, Mr. Dawson SEP's controlling interest is active, irrevocable, and fully protected." I leaned forward slightly, resting my hands on the table. Paper doesn't care about parties. Paper doesn't set care about Instagram or white coats or realtor brochures. It only cares about ink. And my ink has been on this company longer than you's been alive. For the first time, her lawyer didn't speak. He just shifted uncomfortably. Mark tapped a button. The projector shifted slides on the screen: dividend flow, trust protections, founders' seat clauses, POA attempt blocks. Every step she'd tried to take had already been anticipated. Funny thing, Mark said, almost casually. While you were hosting parties, we were doing math. A ripple went through the boardroom. Not laughter, not words. Just the kind of silence that tilts the ground beneath people like Harper. This isn't set right, Harper whispered. This isn't set fair. Fair, I said softly. You mocked the janitor who built the floor. David finally spoke. His voice was low. Harper. She turned toward him, desperate. Say something. He hesitated. His hand was on the folder in front of him. I recognized it. Our old dividend statements. I'd left it on his desk 3 weeks ago. He'd read it. I knew he had. Harper, he said again, and this time his voice cracked. He Sep's the founder. You can doubt this isn't Sept yours. Something inside her shattered. You could hear it in the way her breath hitched, in the way her perfectly smooth voice faltered. She had spent months convincing herself she was untouchable, but paper is colder than promises. Susan called for the vote. It was fast, efficient. 6 in favor, 1 abstain. Harper wasn't even allowed to vote. Mark leaned back, arms folded. Martin closed the binder with a soft thud. Susan nodded at me. Mr. Dawson, as per Resolution 14B, control remains with you. I stood up slowly. Harper didn't said. I looked down the length of the table at her. This woman who had laughed at me over marble floors and candles and open house fantasies. I stayed silent. I said, my voice calm and clear because I loved my family. I swept floors because I wanted to remember where I came from. But respect isn't that optional. Her eyes glistened. Not because she cared about me, because she realized everything she thought was hers had been smoke. Security didn't storm in. No yelling, just a quiet gesture from Susan. 2 men in suits stood at the door, not threatening, just present. Harper Dawson, Susan said evenly. You are not authorized to participate in company governance. Thomas tried to bluster, but there was no ground left to stand on. She rose from the table slowly, gripping the back of her chair like it might save her. David didn't move. Her eyes met his, pleading. He lowered his. She turned toward me. You did this to me. I shook my head. No, Harper. You did this to yourself the moment you thought I was the janitor. She left without another word. The door clicked shut behind her. The sound wasn't loud, but it was final. The boardroom exhaled as one. Mark let out a low whistle. You've still got it, he muttered. I didn't smile. I wasn't celebrating. Revenge doesn't always feel like fireworks. Sometimes it just feels like winter air, sharp, clean, and honest. I looked down at the floor. This room had the same marble I'd installed 30 years ago. The same stone that heard my footsteps before there was a company, before there were enemies disguised as family. The same floor she mocked. Now it held me up and left her outside. No roar, no drama. Just legal ink and time. And that is how quiet power wins. January 8th, 2020. The morning after the vote, Chicago was buried under a new sheet of snow. The kind of cold that doesn't ask permission to come in. It just settles. Even the glass doors at Sterling Freight seemed to shiver a little as they opened. I arrived early, not because I had to, but because I could. The lobby was quiet, only the hum of the heaters and the faint squeak of someone shoveling outside. Ralph gave me the kind of nod that means more than words. Morning, Mr. Dawson. It had been years since he'd called me that out loud. Morning, I answered. I walked across the marble floor I'd polished 1,000 times. Not with a mop this time, just with my shoes, slow and steady. Every step echoed up the atrium, into the steel bones of the building I built. This was my floor, and now everyone knew it. By 8:30, whispers had already started circulating upstairs. Word spreads faster than press releases when humiliation's involved. Harper's name wasn't mentioned loudly, just in quiet, clipped tones. The janitor turned founder story was already traveling through hallways like an urban legend that happened to be true. She called him a janitor? Someone whispered near the water cooler. Yeah, in the lobby, and he owned the damn building. I didn't correct them. I didn't need to. Around 9 a.m. Harper arrived. She didn't walk like the woman who entered the boardroom 2 days ago in a white coat. This was a different walk. Smaller shoulders closer together, heels hitting the marble a little too carefully, like she was trying to tiptoe on ground that used to belong to her. People noticed. When she passed the receptionist's desk, the young intern, Maya, a girl barely 21, straightened her posture. She didn't smile, she just watched. The kind of silent observation that slices through ego sharper than any insult. Harper avoided my eyes when she stepped into the elevator. I didn't follow her. I didn't have to. The building wasn't hers anymore. It never was. Later that morning, in the break room, two warehouse supervisors, guys who'd worked under me back in the early 90s, spotted me by the coffee machine. One of them, Ron, grinned wide. You really let her have it, huh? I shook my head. I didn't do anything. I just reminded everyone who signed the checks. Ron chuckled. That CISP's doing something. The other Darnell leaned against the counter. Word is she tried to talk to legal this morning. She can talk, I said, pouring sugar into my coffee. The paper doesn't set care. They laughed softly, the kind of laugh that carries respect. Then they went back to work. Life moved on. It always does when the truth is solid. At 1:15 p.m., I stepped outside to clear my head. Snow crunched under my boots. The wind whipped hard off the river, slicing through my coat like knives made of ice. Across the street, I saw Harper standing alone, clutching her phone. No entourage, no realtor, no lawyer, just her, staring at nothing. She'd been trying to call people. I could tell by the way she gripped the device too tight, like it might change reality if she held it hard enough. But something had changed. People were starting to ghost her. Thomas Archer, the slick lawyer she brought to the boardroom, had already sent an email to the company's SEPS counsel that morning. I seen it. A single line: I will not be representing Miss Dawson further. She burned through allies fast. That's the thing about borrowed power. When the spotlight goes out, so do the moths. David came to see me around 3 p.m. I was in the office I hadn't used in almost 10 years. The nameplate had been gathering dust. I wiped it clean with my thumb as he stepped inside. He looked tired, older than he should have at 41. Harper had aged him in ways she never saw. Dad, he said quietly. I leaned back in the chair. David. He hesitated. I didn't no. I tilted my head. Didn't that you? He winced. I didn't know it would go this far. It didn't at the set a bad day anywhere, I said. It was always here, you just didn't set it look. He dropped into the chair across from me, hands fidgeting. She sips not taking it well. I imagine not. She says everyone's sips turned on her. I gave a small, humorless smile. That sips what happens when people realize your power was just air. He looked at me like he wanted to defend her, out of habit, out of some old promise. But the words never came. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. A photo. Laminated, worn at the edges. It was the old truck, the first Sterling freight truck, from 1990. He used to ride in it with me on Saturdays when he was 10, handing me tools like he was part of the crew. He slid it across the desk. I kept this, he said. I picked it up slowly. The edges were warm from his hand. I hadn't seen that photo in years. He didn't say, sorry. I didn't ask him to. Sometimes silence is the apology you can live with. By the time Harper returned home that night, the house wasn't her stage anymore either. The realtor had pulled out of the arrangement. Karen sent a formal withdrawal notice at 4:27 p.m. citing uncertain legal structure. Translation: she doesn't touch sinking ships. Harper paced the foyer, phone pressed to her ear. No, I didn't know about the trust. No, he never told me. No, that's not how this works, she hissed. She stopped talking when she saw me. Her eyes were bloodshot, not from crying, but from panic. Real panic. The kind that sets in when image collapses and nothing's left underneath. They sit are all gone, she whispered. I didn't answer. Her voice rose a notch. Do you even care? Yes, I said. Just not about your audience. She let out a sound, not quite a scream, not quite a sob. Something in between. It echoed off the walls like a final performance. January 10th, 2 days after the boardroom reckoning, Harper's car wasn't in the driveway when I woke up. By 9 a.m., Lucia came in with a set of keys. Harper had dropped them on the porch. Leaving? Lucia asked softly. Running, I said. Her things were still scattered in the guest closet, but not for long. People like Harper always pack fast when their reflection isn't flattering anymore. I walked into the foyer, stood on the marble floor and looked around. For the first time in months, the air didn't smell like staged candles. Just the cold and quiet I loved. This wasn't set victory music. This was stillness. She had cracked in public. She was breaking in private. And I wasn't set holding her up anymore. January 17th, 2020. The Cook County Courthouse doesn't have the same cold as the Sterling Freight Lobby. It's worse. It's the kind of cold that lives in fluorescent lights, old tile floors, and waiting rooms that smell faintly of burnt coffee and fear. I sat in the hallway outside courtroom 4C, watching people file through the security checkpoint. Some wore sharp suits, some wore tired faces. Everyone had a story. Mine just happened to be written in signatures. Harper arrived 15 minutes late, wearing sunglasses inside. Her hair was pulled back too tightly. Her foundation cracked near her temples. She wasn't walking like a victor anymore. She was walking like someone trying not to break in front of strangers. David walked 2 steps behind her. Not beside, not ahead, 2 steps behind, like a man unsure which side of the line he's standing on. I didn't stand when she passed me. I just kept my hands folded in my lap. Power isn't in standing. It's in staying seated and watching someone who thought they could take everything realize they're out of moves. Martin sat beside me, flipping through the neat stack of documents like he'd been waiting his whole career for this exact moment. You ready? He asked quietly. I've been ready since November 3rd, I said. We entered the courtroom together at 9:27 a.m. Judge Kerrigan sat at the bench, old school, no nonsense. The kind of judge who didn't tolerate theatrics. His robe was worn at the cuffs, his voice dry as January wind, perfect for this. Case number 20F1749, the clerk called, Dawson versus Dawson. Harper winced when she heard it out loud. That's the thing about betrayal. It sounds different when it's printed on the docket. Her attorney, a new one this time, stood up first. A younger man, too eager, too polished. He launched into an opening statement about family equity and reasonable distribution of marital assets. His words felt like they'd been copied from a template. Martin didn't interrupt. He didn't have to. Judges can smell rehearsed desperation. When it was our turn, Martin stood slowly. Your Honor, he said evenly, the matter is simpler than my colleague suggests. He placed a single thick binder on the evidence table with a soft thunk. Trust agreement, executed November 25th, 2019. Recorded with Cook County Recorder SEP's office, instrument number 191125 4487. Irrevocable. Primary trustee, Alexis Dawson. Successor trustee, Noah Dawson. The judge adjusted his glasses. And these assets are... House at 441 West Cedar, Martin said, flipping a page. Estimated value $1.3 million. Founder Sipsets Equity and Sterling Freight. Currently valued at $4.2 million. All assets locked under an irrevocable trust, executed well before any pending marital dispute. The opposing counsel tried to interrupt, but Kerrigan held up a hand. Irrevocable means irrevocable, counselor. You should know that. I didn't look at Harper, but I could feel her shrinking 2 seats away. Paper doesn't lie, and it doesn't care who's wearing the nicest coat. Then came the digital evidence. Martin had it queued up neatly. A screenshot of Harper Sip's text. Once we get him out, the company sips ours. Voicemail transcript dated November 7th. He sips old baggage, David. We need to clear it. Realtor contract drafts she'd signed without authority. Witness statement from Karen, the realtor, confirming Harper Sip's plan. Every piece was clean. Simple, quiet. Martin handed the judge a bound packet like a surgeon passing tools. We Sutter not seeking anything from her, he said. We Sutter simply asserting that what Sutter's mine was never hers to claim. The judge flipped a few pages. His eyes barely flickered. Opposing counsel fidgeted. Your Honor, we sipped like to argue that as the spouse of the trustee, Mrs. Dawson has an equitable interest in— No, she doesn't set. Judge Kerrigan interrupted. Illinois law is clear. Trust assets are non-marital property, especially when executed prior to proceedings. Harper whispered something sharp to her attorney. It didn't help. He looked like a man trying to bail water with a colander. Then it was Harper Sip's turn to speak. She stood. Her hands were shaking, though she tried to hide it by gripping the edge of the table. I didn't sit no, she said. He blindsided me. He didn't tell me about any of this. Martin didn't move. Neither did I. Judge Kerrigan Sepp's voice stayed calm. Mrs. Dawson, you Sepp are not entitled to disclosure of non-marital assets, and based on the evidence, your behavior suggests intent to claim ownership regardless of standing. Her lip trembled, just slightly. That house, she whispered, that house is where my son lives. Our grandson, I corrected softly, for the record. For the first time in weeks, she looked straight at me. No pretense, no mask. Just raw, cornered panic. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I felt finality. You didn't lose the house, I said, voice steady. You never had it. The hearing lasted a little over an hour. When it was over, the ruling was simple. All trust assets remain fully in the trust. Harper Dawson has no claim to marital or corporate property. Harper Dawson is entitled only to her personal belongings and agreed-upon support until final separation proceedings. The house, company shares, and board seat are legally sealed. When the judge's gavel came down, it didn't sound dramatic. It sounded clean, like a door clicking shut. Harper left the courtroom before anyone else. No sunglasses this time, just a gray coat and silence. No one followed her, not even David. Outside, the sky had gone that specific shade of winter, pale, almost colorless, like the air was holding its breath. Martin shook my hand on the steps. Congratulations, he said. I shook my head. This isn't set to celebration. No, he agreed. It's a correction. David caught up to me near the streetlight. He didn't say much, just shoved his hands into his pockets and stared at the courthouse doors. I didn't know it had come to this, he said quietly. It was always coming, I replied. She sips, moving out. I nodded. Yeah. He looked down at the snow. I should seen it. You see what you want to see when you love someone, I said. And sometimes they use that. David's eyes shone, not from tears, but from something heavier. Truth has weight. He reached into his pocket again and handed me Noah's winter hat, the one Harper always claimed to have bought, but I knew the tag inside had my name on it. I bought it last year, small details. Real ownership. Dad, he said. Thank you. I placed a hand on his shoulder. No forgiveness, just presence. When I got home that night, the house was silent. Lucia had left the kitchen light on. Snow clung to my boots as I stepped inside. The marble floor reflected the pale glow of the chandelier. Harper's suitcase was gone from the hallway. A single wineglass sat abandoned in the sink. I walked into the foyer and stood in the exact spot where, weeks ago, Harper had laughed at me like I was nothing more than a janitor with a mop. Now the floor was mine again, legally, fully, permanently. No one to mock it. No one to try to sell it. No one to rewrite its story. Just the house, the floor, and the quiet. The kind of quiet that tastes like justice. February 1st, 2020. The air in Chicago had shifted. Winter wasn't over, but it had softened around the edges. like the city itself was taking a slow breath after weeks of holding it in. The lake was still frozen in places, but the edges were starting to crack, thin sheets of ice giving way to dark water underneath. I stood in the lobby of Sterling Freight at 6:43 a.m., holding the mop handle in my hands. The marble beneath my boots gleamed like it always had when I was the one polishing it. Not because I had to anymore, but because I wanted to. People never understand this part. They think revenge ends with a bang, but the truth is it ends in silence, not empty silence. Earned silence. The kind where no one can touch your floor anymore. The security guard, Ralph, wandered over with his usual thermos of black coffee. He leaned against the desk, eyes half amused. "Never thought I'd see you down here again," he said. I shrugged. "Old habits." He gave a low chuckle. "You own half this place and still mop your own floor." "I built it," I said simply. "It remembers me." Ralph sipped his coffee and nodded. "Whole building feels different now, like lighter." It did. The tension that used to live in these walls, the hushed gossip, the smug laughter that came with Harper's clicky heels, it had disappeared, gone like smoke out an open window. At 7:15 a.m., the front desk phone rang. Maya, the intern, picked it up with her crisp, nervous efficiency. She'd come a long way since the first day she'd seen Harper breeze past her like she didn't exist. "Yes, Mr. Dawson is here," she said, into the receiver, glancing at me. "I can transfer you." I raised an eyebrow. She covered the receiver with her hand. "It sits legal. They want to confirm the trust paperwork post-hearing." I nodded. "Put them through." The line clicked, and Mr. Crandall from legal greeted me with that buttoned-up tone lawyers reserve for people who've just won. "Good morning, Mr. Dawson. Just a courtesy update. All filings from the January 17th ruling have cleared the county recorder's office. Deed trust confirmation and Resolution 14B are now final and unappealable." Hearing it spoken out loud hit different than seeing the paperwork. "Thank you," I said. "Congratulations, sir." I hung up slowly, letting the weight of the word final sink into the marble beneath me. Harper couldn't undo a single page of what she tried to erase. Around 8 o'clock, Mark Franklin walked in through the revolving door, bundled in a thick parka. He spotted me instantly and shook his head with a grin. "Of course you're down here," he said, setting his gloves on the reception counter. "You could be upstairs with the corner view." "I like the lobby," I said, "because it sets yours." He was right. Mark leaned beside me, hands in his jacket pockets. "We had the board follow-up last night. You know what the first thing they said was?" "What?" "They said they'd call me said store standing on. Sets literally and figuratively. The janitor story set's a legend now." I smirked, just a little. "I didn't plan the legend part." "You didn't have to," Mark replied. "Real things don't need PR." Harper hadn't been back in the building since the court ruling. Word was she'd moved out of the Cedar Street house 2 weeks ago, just after Lucia called to ask where to store the few boxes she left behind. She'd taken her clothes, a few designer handbags, a half-used bottle of perfume, and not much else. She couldn't take the house. She couldn't take the company. She couldn't stake the floor. Power she never owned vanished the moment the documents turned solid. David came by the lobby around 9:12 a.m., wearing his old black coat, the one I bought him his first year out of college. It had a tear on the inside of the sleeve. Harper always told him to throw it away, but now it was back on his shoulders. "You're mopping again," he said, shaking his head with a quiet laugh. "Yep."
Yo, stir impossible.
I looked at him. "That sip's why we still have a company." He smiled, small but real. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something carefully folded, the old truck photo he'd given me outside the courthouse. He'd framed it, simple black frame, nothing fancy. He set it on the lobby desk like a bookmark in a long story. "It belongs here," he said. He wasn't wrong. That old truck was the beginning. Before shares, before trusts, before marble floors, just work and grit, and a dream no one thought would stretch 3 decades. I ran my finger along the edge of the frame. "You still remember the sound the engine made?" David laughed softly. like a smoker with a cough. We stood there for a long second, father and son, not needing to say what had already been rebuilt between us. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Around noon, I walked out through the lobby doors and stood on the front steps, looking at the street. Snow was melting in uneven patches, revealing the black concrete underneath. The city smelled like salt, exhaust, and cold air, exactly the way it did 30 years ago when I walked into this building for the first time. Back then, I was just a man with a toolbox and a stubborn streak. I laid this floor tile by tile, listening to old AM radio, thinking about how someday I'd leave something behind that couldn't be bought or mocked. I didn't know then that the floor itself would be my witness. Inside, the company moved on without Harper's shadow. Board meetings returned to being about numbers, not posturing. Dividend distributions went through cleanly. Noah's trust was solid. My founder's seat stood untouched. No one called me the janitor anymore. But some mornings when the light hit just right and the building was quiet, I still picked up the mop and let the handle fit into my hand like it always did. This wasn't about cleaning, it was about remembering. Later that afternoon, Lucia stopped by my house with a small tin of cookies. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel lighter," I answered. "You finally took back what was always yours." "Yeah," I said quietly. "I did." She smiled knowingly, like people who've seen the truth for a long time before anyone else bothers to look. Lucia always saw more than Harper ever did. That night, after everyone had gone home, I returned to the lobby alone. The overhead lights hummed softly. My footsteps echoed down the empty hall. I leaned on the mop handle again, looking at the clean marble beneath me. Months ago, Harper stood here and laughed. She thought the floor made me small. She didn't just understand it made me permanent. This floor had outlasted her. This floor would outlast me. I whispered it to myself, not for anyone else to hear. She laughed at the floor I built. In the end, it held me up and left her outside. It wasn't set vengeance. It wasn't set gloating. It was truth, clean, unshakable, and mine. March 14th, 2020. Chicago spring doesn't arrive gently. It barges in with half-melted snowbanks, stubborn wind, and that smell of thawed pavement that feels more like a memory than a season. I walked into Sterling Freight that morning, with the lobby doors propped open, for the first time in months. The sun slid across the marble floor without a shadow chasing it. It wasn't warm yet, but the light itself was softer, golden, the way it used to look when David was little, and Noah didn't exist yet. The building felt alive again, not loud, just breathing. I stood at the bottom of the staircase, listening to the sound the mop made as Tony, the new janitor, pushed it down the hall. Yes, I hired someone new. Tony's 48 ex-union guy. Works quiet, doesn't gossip. Takes pride in doing it right. I pay him double the going rate. Some people ask me why I'd pay a janitor more than the average office assistant. They don't get it. This isn't set just a building. This is a legacy. Tony looked up from his work and gave me a respectful nod. "Morning, Mr. Dawson." "Morning, Tony," I replied. I handed him a fresh pack of gloves, the kind I used to wear back in the early days when solvent stung my fingertips and the smell clung to my hair on the train ride home. He smiled. "You sure you don't want to do the floor yourself?" I shook my head. I already did my shift at 9 a.m. The board meeting started upstairs. I didn't rush. I walked slowly, like a man who owns time instead of chasing it. Resolution 14B had been locked. My founder's seat was etched in ink and law. No one had the power to take it, not anymore. When I entered the boardroom, the view of the Chicago River cut through the windows like polished steel. Mark Franklin was already seated. So was his daughter, Amelia, newly appointed to the board. I'd known her since she was 12, back when she used to run through the lobby with chocolate on her fingers, and I pretended to be mad about the fingerprints on the walls. "Morning, Alexis," Mark said. "Morning," I replied, pulling out my chair. The boardroom used to feel like a battlefield. Now it felt like a living room that just happened to have a table worth more than my first house. Amelia shuffled through her notes. Dividend schedule confirmed. Noah SIP's trust allocation is secure for Q2. Hearing Noah's name in a board meeting made something in my chest settle into place. He wasn't just a teenager anymore, he was the future. And not because of blood, but because of foundation. He'd started interning at the front desk 2 weeks ago, answering phones with a nervous grin that looked a lot like David's did at 20. I didn't push him toward it. He walked in on his own. That's how legacy works when it's real. It doesn't need begging. Around 11:30, the meeting wrapped. I headed downstairs again, hands in my coat pockets. Outside, a delivery truck backed up to the loading dock. Loud beep, grinding gears, the same kind of sound the old Sterling freight truck made back in 1990. For a moment, I was standing in two timelines at once. The young man with calloused hands and a dream, and the older man who turned it into something written in marble and trust deeds. I walked back into the lobby and found Noah leaning on the reception counter, chatting with Maya. He looked up and grinned when he saw me. "Hey, Grandpa," he said, without shame, without awkwardness. "Hey, kid." He pointed toward the marble. "Tony says you used to mop this every morning." "Every night, too," I added. "Why?" I thought for a second before answering. "Because I wanted it to last." He tilted his head. "You didn't just build a floor, huh?" I laughed quietly. "No. I built something people thought they could take." Harper's name didn't come up much anymore. When it did, it was in whispers outside my circle, like a story half remembered. Someone mentioned she was living in a beige apartment in Naperville now. No more realtor galas. No more charity events. No more Dawson Future Empire speeches. Just muted walls and quiet resentment. Tried to appeal twice through her attorney. Both times the court clerk sent her the same 3 words: no standing remains. The empire she thought she was building was made of smoke. When the air cleared, only the marble floor stayed. That night, after everyone went home, I stayed behind again. Tony had already finished mopping. The lights above the lobby reflected perfectly off the clean stone. Not a single streak, not a single flaw. The same way I used to leave it. I walked the perimeter slowly, hands in my pockets. The building hummed, heating system, faint traffic outside, a truck engine somewhere down the block. It was the same sound I'd heard 30 years ago, only this time it belonged to me entirely. I stopped near the center of the lobby, the exact spot where Harper first called me the janitor. Her voice was long gone now, but the floor still remembered, and so did I. I sat down on the edge of the front desk, not caring about the creases in my coat. I watched the faint shadow of the city lights crawl across the floor through the glass doors. This, not the court ruling, not the board vote, not the trust paperwork. This moment right here was the real revenge. Not rage, not spectacle. Stillness, permanence, ownership. In a different life, Harper would have walked in right now, tossed her coat over a chair she didn't buy, and talked about listings she didn't understand. She'd have tried to turn my foundation into her performance. But in this life, she was outside, and the floor was clean. Before heading out, I whispered it one last time into the quiet lobby, not as a threat, not even as a reminder, just as truth carved into the world. "You didn't lose me," I said softly. "You gave me away." That's the thing about power, real power. It doesn't roar, it echoes. And tonight it echoed through polished marble that had my fingerprints in its foundation. March wind pushed through the revolving doors as I stepped outside. The city smelled like thawed snow and steel. I zipped my coat and looked back at the building. My building, the one I built, the one I nearly lost, the one I won back without a single scream. Harper had mocked the floor beneath her feet. I had become it. And floors don't flinch. They endure.